where after he killed himself, his sister found his body, and she called the press, and she called the police, and she thought that she was going to have to make this big statement to the press about what had happened to the legendary William Inge, and no one showed up. Not a soul. One police officer. And while the police officer is sitting and taking the statement from the sister about what happened and where she found her brother, he picks up the Oscar for Splinter in the Grass off his desk, and he weighs it in his hand thoughtfully, and he goes, "So that's what it feels like to hold one of these." And he puts it back down on the desk and goes home.
Welcome back to the Unreal Podcast, the internet's only podcast. I'm your host for the day, Rhyme, and today I am joined by author Kit Williams. You may know him as K. Anon if you read the issues of Lamp by Lit that he appeared in. He's on to talk about his latest release, which is a collection of short stories, among other things and other interests he has. Thanks for joining us, Kit.
Oh, thank you, Rhyme. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, man. We've been trying to coordinate this interview for so long. It's fun. It's fun to actually be here.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, I'm very excited to be part of this and, be a part of Lamp and now the part of the Unreal Press and everything. So it's finally feeling like I'm starting to make it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to have you here. Talk about Lamp. Lamp's always been interesting to me, but I never had anything ready to submit to that publication. How was your experience with that magazine?
Lamp is fantastic, really. I joined issue 3, I think, because I remember the first issue. The first issue I remember seeing post threads about, but I never actually looked into them. And then the second issue, I think they went to photo for that one, for the second one. But I submitted a story called, I think it was The Photographer, was my first story that went into Lamp, and it was a flash fiction piece that I've been kind of considering reworking in my mind. I've actually been thinking about going back and redoing my entire collection, to be completely honest with you. I'm a brutal perfectionist with my work. You know, I read it, I reread it, I write it, I rewrite it. But the support that the Lamp editors gave me, both the editor Anton and Prussia Anton, got me into a real groove and a work schedule of my writing to have something consistent to give to that publication and to give other publications, maybe if Lamp didn't pick them up. And I was pretty much in every single issue of Lamp from that point forward up until the hiatus where they stopped. And of course now you can find all of those in my debut collection, The Dose Makes the Poison. And it's just been a fantastic avenue to open things up to me. With the publication of my book, I had agents reaching out to me to see if I had anything else in the works. I've got people prodding me for what's next? What's going to go next? And now I'm on the podcast, and I've done a few other interviews here and there. And it's just surreal because all I've ever wanted to do is be a writer, and I'd kind of given up on that happening, and by happenstance, just by browsing 4chan threads, I'm starting to accomplish it.
Yeah, I didn't know Lamp's editing process was that involved. So the editor, does he actually give you substantive feedback on everything that you get submitted, or?
Yeah, I got some pretty good feedback. A lot of it was praise, which. I would send a piece in and I'd be like, hey, here's this for consideration. He'd be like, oh man, this is beautiful. This is going in for sure. So,
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I felt like I felt like, I was on the right track at least. But I will say, getting feedback from people is very important to me as an artist because I want to be one of the greats. One of my biggest influences is Raymond Carver. And Raymond Carver, he's one of those weird ones where, you say you like Raymond Carver, but you actually like Gordon Lish because Gordon Lish was the person that went through and edited everything for him.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And so, I want to be able to grow as an artist. I don't want to just stagnate and put out stories that are okay or even mediocre, consistently. I want to make stories that, change the world. I want to make stories that the Nobel Prize Committee will look at and say, this in 200 years will join the canon. And I have a lot of projects in mind that I think can get there. But yeah, feedback is definitely important to me, and I don't get it too often, sadly. A lot of people that read my work they all like, oh, it's really good. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm glad you liked it, but like, what didn't you like? You know what I mean?
Yeah, tear into it, man.
Yeah,
Uh,
tear it to pieces. Shit on it.
yeah, yeah. A lot of authors, especially on this slice, I feel like even if they don't speak it out loud, they have aspirations like this. Like you don't spend months, years of your life reading the classics, writing your little essays, making your little notes, trying to learn, absorb from the greats, and then not aspire to join the ranks.
Exactly. And it really feels like there's like the old guard is kind of dying off because Harold Bloom passed away, what, 2 years ago now, somewhere around there.
Yeah, for
And then
years.
you have and then you have the new academics who are calling for a deconstruction of the canon. And the thing that always bothered me about that is I don't think the canon should be deconstructed. I think it should be reworked. The authors that are already in it are in it for a reason. If you want to add people to it, by all means. But I think we should hold those authors that get added to the standard of who's already in it, you know, and
Yeah,
like like Ernest Hemingway. Like you can't deny that Ernest Hemingway hasn't affected pretty much every writer that's come after him, um, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So his place, and I think when I read the Western canon, I think like the Old Man and the Sea and like the Sun Also Rises were like the only ones that Bloom really talked about.
mhm.
But like nowadays, Kazuo Ishiguro is a good example of an author that people want to put into the canon. I think he deserves it. Um, but like it's a matter of how impactful is his work. How many people pick up a pen and say they write because they read the works of Kazuo Ishiguro. You know what I mean?
And there's somebody out there who has made their entire life just a study of the work of that author, and that's kind of the marker of a great author
Right.
with long-term impact. And also, that whole movement, I think, is propped up on like a bit of a flawed idea of how these works persist through time. There are so many people who were authors who belong to that same class of person whose works have just faded into irrelevance. I mean, have you read any P.G. Wodehouse lately? You know, the guy who wrote the Jeeves novels.
Yeah. G.K. Chesterton's a great example for
Oh
me. I
yeah,
love the
that's a
works of
better
G.K.
example.
Chesterton, but he's pretty much forgotten.
Yeah, and both these guys were like all the
Uh,
contemporaries that are actually read today. They were much bigger than them at the time, and they're completely dusted because time is actually the greatest filter. You can't artificially prop up too many authors.
exactly.
It was oh yeah. So the book, The Dose Makes a Poison, is that all of the short stories that you submitted to Lamp? How did you construct that?
So basically, what I did was I went through and I re-edited the ones that were in Lamp. There's actually 4 stories in The Dose Makes a Poison that aren't in Lamp. Marginal Lives is one of them. Burial of a Field Mouse is another. Um, and just those stories were for Lamp. During Lamp's hiatus, I was going to send them for issue 10, issue 11, issue
Right.
12. But as they weren't coming out, um, I had assumed that Lamp was over and done with, kind of like the Lit Quarterly had done a few years ago.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So my mindset was that if Lamp was done with, um, I needed to put these stories out, and I wanted them under my own name, which was a big thing. Um, because I know I have a bit of a presence on 4chan, not as much as F. Gardner or Ogden Nesmer, but I know there are people that know who K on it is and who like my work. So I wanted to brand myself and you know make it known that I'm also an author that has aspirations to be one of the big authors. And God forbid, I don't want threads made about me. That's my thing. I'm a very reclusive person, to be completely honest. So I log into Lit like every day for book recommendations and things like that. So if I see a thread that's like Kit Williams thread, I'm gonna be like, no, don't do that. Don't stop, please. So, um, so the fact that my presence isn't as impactful as Gardner or Nesmer, I'm kind of okay with, to be completely honest with you. Um, there's a quote by Richard Yates. I don't know if you know who that is, but he says that he doesn't want when he was talking to Andre Dubois the second. Yes, Andre Dubois the second. He was saying that when it came to writing, he didn't care about the money. He didn't care about the fame. He just wanted to reach people with his art, and that's kind of my motto. Is I just want to make art for art's sake. I feel like art's been too commercialized and too um, sanitized, I guess is the word, for people to just enjoy it, And that's part of what affects my style so much. I'm a Kansan, or at least I have lived in Kansas for about 12 years. So living in the American heartland has certainly affected my perceptions of people. And being a working class person in the American heartlands, like I'm not some bourgeois, laissez-faire kind of person. I have worked factories from like basically my whole life. Um, would like to change that, but I've seen people, get stuck, and I've seen people give up, and I've seen people, resign themselves to, I don't want to say mediocrity, but kind of a contentedness, almost a stoicism that their lives aren't going to improve, and I that just can't, that doesn't sit right with me. So I feel like if I have the talent to improve my station, I can, at the very least, reach people that feel the same way that I do, and use that influence and use that privilege and that power to change the world in my own sort of way, where I can, I maybe I don't reach 1 million people like an actor at the Oscars does, but if I can reach 100, if I can reach 10, and those 10 people go on to do 10 things, I can be satisfied with that kind of legacy.
So the title of the work is "The Dose Makes a Poison," and you mentioned growing up in, I
Mhm.
guess, the Rust Belt, essentially, a place that's kind of famous for not
Yeah.
only stagnation but regression over time and deaths of despair. Is that walk me
Yeah.
through like the naming of this work?
So the dose makes the poison is a chemical law that states the dose of something um, is equivalent to its toxicity. So, you know, water by itself isn't poisonous, but 100 liters of it in your bloodstream will definitely kill you. Chocolate is the same way. It's not toxic in the clinical sense, but if you eat 6 pounds of it, you're going to get sick. And so my mindset for naming the stories what they were, because a lot of the stories are about uncertainty, a legacy, and everything like that. So I have one story called The Balcony, which is probably one of my more popular stories based on the people that have read it and the people that have talked to me about it. And The Balcony is pretty much an autobiographical kind of story where this author comes home to his apartment, and it's a rundown apartment, and he's exhausted from work, and he's getting older, and he sits down at his typewriter to write, and he gets into the groove of it, and he stops because it just doesn't make any sense. And he crumbles up the paper, and he goes to throw it away, and it bounces off the top of the trash can that's already full of letters and notes, and it kind of rolls away. And he picks it up, and he unfolds it, and he empties the trash can, and he unfolds them, and he looks at it, and he doesn't, he kind of just retrospects on the fact that there's all this failure, all this doubt, all this regression, um, and he ends up going out to his balcony to smoke. And while he's on his balcony, he stands up onto the edge of it, and looks down and thinks about killing himself. And then there are other stories like that, like The Night Patron is about a person that's at a library at night writing a story, and he's comparing himself to another author that lives in his town who has died, and what kind of legacy that author left, and if he will be similar in any kind of regard for that. So when I was thinking about naming the collection, um, the dose makes the poison was the first thing that popped into my mind, because living in the Midwest is a perfect adage of that statement. There's so much of everyday normal life that you can take before it just breaks you and kills you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So your stories, they get into this very over-the-shoulder look at a person in despair, and this is all very noir, even from the title. And you mentioned your greatest influence is noir fiction. What other sources do you draw from in fiction? It can be novels, book, short stories, film. What influences would you list
Uh,
for yourself as a writer?
Definitely Raymond Carver, definitely
Mm-hmm.
W.G. Sebald, the kind of
Oh.
stream. Yeah, definitely if you read it, you'll see the kind of introspective stream of consciousness. My stories they're not very dialogue heavy. In fact, they tend to have very little or even no dialogue, and but most of it is their inner thoughts, their inner recollection as they react to the world. So, like I said, in the balcony, the protagonist, he picks up all those failed projects of his and he unfurls them, and he spends like a paragraph thinking about how he's failed, as what he wants to do with his life, and he thinks back to work because in the story he's an accountant. I've never been an accountant. I don't want to be an accountant. But he talks about this coworker who had a heart attack at her desk and just fell over dead, and how they wheeled her out and everything. And he doesn't understand giving that much of yourself to something that he views as pointless. And so my stories are full of kind of introspective monologues like that. Oh, so Sebald for sure. Anton Chekhov, another big influence of mine, probably one of the greatest short story writers of all time, and he did so from, even though he was a doctor and a bit of a bourgeoisie kind of person, he has a lot of stories about the working class person and what the working class person wants, and he also writes about dreams and despair and legacy and death. So those are probably my biggest three. Ernest Hemingway for sure. The Icebergs Theory. I know it's ironic to say Hemingway and Sebald have influenced me, but Hemingway has left his mark on every writer of the 21st century, in my own opinion, with his writing style and just what he wrote about. Hemingway being one of the first people to kind of write. I would say, well, Hemingway's most known for it, but the post-World War II functionality of people turning to that introspection, and not just him, but all over the world, Thomas Bernhard and all that, similar things. Carver, Chekhov, Hemingway, Sebald, and then when you get into film, David Lynch for sure. Whenever I picture my stories in my head, I kind of picture like the camera movements and the staging that would be in a David Lynch film. Um, yeah. So and I kind of think like if these were put to stage, like what director, or if these were not just stage, but if they were put to stage or film, like what director would I want to be adapting my work? And David Lynch is just the first person that pops into my mind, because it's like I almost write for him anyway.
You've mentioned not really a lot of contemporary literature, and the politics and the scene around contemporary literature doesn't seem to really pass the smell test. But you write in this very contemporary tradition, this sort of post Flaubert. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's flaneur, which is the person he's walking, he's observing, he's introspecting. It's very post-war sort of writing style. So the style and the foundations of contemporary literature obviously appeal to you. So what is it about literature in the past 20 or so years that you find off-putting?
Oh, I don't think the literature in the past 20 years is off-putting. I think the literature before it just appeals to me more, in the sense that I'm a Rust Belt citizen who, very much, I struggle with mental illness. I struggle with identity and legacy, and of course there's the ever constant, the constant thinking of death and mortality. Um, And so I feel like the literature that we have talked about resonates with me more, just because I can kind of place myself in that environment more easily than I could in the pages of Sally Rooney, if that makes any sense. Because
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
been a few. Yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
No, that. No, I was just gonna say that perspective. It makes perfect sense given where you're stationed right now. Modern literature, more than anything, the most obvious aspect of it is that it is so coastal. It is so urban that this entire sort of voice that you've got and that appeals to you is completely missing from it. I get that.
Yeah, and like I said, I was born in Charleston, specifically North Charleston, South Carolina. So I'm no
Mm-hmm.
stranger to the larger cities. Like I know what Columbia's like. Um, I know what Lexington is and everything like that, because I've lived in those cities. I've lived in Myrtle Beach, and I've seen the tourism, and yeah, I've been to places like Houston and Baton Rouge and Los Angeles, and I don't know how else to describe them other than noisy. There's too much. There's too much there that I get overwhelmed. I get overstimulated. Um, it causes this greater anxiety when I'm in those areas than I feel here in Kansas. Um,
Yeah.
and maybe it's because I've gotten used to Kansas over the
Mm-hmm.
years. But if people ask me, what I identify myself as, yeah, I identify myself as a Kansan because even though I lived in South Carolina for like 12 years of my life, I've been in Kansas for just as much. And only in Kansas do I really feel like a community. There's a closeness here that you can't find anywhere else. That's hard to explain to people that aren't here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, we're from similar areas. I'm from Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Uh, we're examples of like big, noisy cities. I've been to those places, and just think about how small and intimate they are compared to something like New York City or Chicago. How far removed someone's perspective is if they're only really operating in those massive cities on the coast compared to the rest of the country.
And I feel like that's a big part of the cultural zeitgeist in the United States right now, where people on the West Coast and the East Coast live in these very high towered conditioned lives, and they kind of forget what it's like to struggle for food and for um, education, because you know all the money gets poured into California schools, all the money gets poured into East Coast schools, and people that are in the flyover states just kind of get left behind and even looked down on for not being part of that.
Obviously, you've mentioned how important your Midwest life and lifestyle is to informing your literature. But well, I guess I can't be the only one who's listening to this thinking this. What do you do in Kansas?
Well, more than you would think. There's actually a lot of cool small town kind of things to do because I live in a town of about 8,000 people. I do not live in a very big town, but I can tell you
Wow.
this: if I say anything that you can do in this town, it's going to dox me for where I live, which I'm totally fine with. I'm totally fine with. Um, so one of the things we do here is the William Hinge Theater Festival, which is an event from April to May where we honor a Pulitzer Prize and Oscar-winning playwright that came from this town named William Inge, who passed away in 1973 from carbon monoxide asphyxiation. Being around that, I think, has also had a somewhat of a somber influence on my work because I'm always comparing myself to him because here I am in this town of 8,000 and he was the big writer before I was, and now people like I do stuff at the college, I do stuff with the community, and I do things at the at City Hall and stuff, and uh, and now I'm slowly, in my town at least, becoming known as the big writer, William Inge. And it doesn't put pressure on me like you would think it does, but it does. It makes me very introspective because of how his life ended up turning out. Because, of course he killed himself. That's the big one.
Uh,
But there's a story, and maybe I'm justified in what I said earlier, and that the small town life is better because he killed himself after moving to Hollywood, and he did a film called Splendor in the Grass, which won him an Oscar. But he ended up killing himself after a string of failures in the theater world. And I remember the story so well because it haunted me, where after he killed himself, his sister found his body, and she called the press and she called the police, and she thought that she was going to have to make this big statement to the press about what had happened to the legendary William Inge, and no one showed up. Not a soul. One police officer. And while the police officer is sitting and taking the statement from the sister about what happened and where she found her brother, he picks up the Oscar for Splinter in the Grass off his desk, and he weighs it in his hand thoughtfully, and he goes, "So that's what it feels like to hold one of these." And he puts it back down on the desk and goes home.
Wow.
And I was like, holy shit. Like,
What a
just
life.
the thought of putting so much effort into my craft to where not being able to do it forces me to suicide, and that being the reaction of the work that I put in, it's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
should be.
yeah.
I mean, there are people
Well,
who do hard back-breaking labor the whole life, like menial labor the whole life, and when they get an injury and they can no longer like lift heavy things, they have no idea what to do with the rest of their life. They have no idea what to do for 20, 30 years, and they just die of a heart attack at 58. And you not
right.
only are you putting your heart and soul into a craft, but you've reached the fucking pinnacle. And now you get to spend 30 years sliding down the slope. And that's like actually an above average outcome for this sort of endeavor. Why wouldn't that terrify you?
Right. And there's so many examples like him, like, Edgar Allan Poe dying of rabies in the streets of Baltimore, forgotten, you know, um, Zelda Fitzgerald burning to death in a sanatorium because her husband thought she was batshit insane, and they didn't let her out. Like, they didn't let her out of the sanatorium as it was burning to the ground. And it's fucked up that artists get kind of thrown to the side like that. Um, but back to your original question of things to do in this town. Um, my town is well known for one of the largest Halloween festivals in Kansas, if not the entire United States, which is called Neowalla. And it's Neowalla spelled back. It's Halloween spelled backwards, and we've been doing it since about 1913. And there's just a huge. You can actually type in Neowalla, Kansas, like right now into Google, and there's a big ass Wikipedia page on it that goes into everything that we do. We start with a musical, and from there we have like craft fairs, chili cook-offs, amusement park rides, fairs, rodeos. It's a huge thing, so that's always something to look forward to. And I know to our listeners that me saying two things probably doesn't make Independence, Kansas sound too appealing, but I don't know. Like I said, the comfort of small town life, the routine of having those two things to look forward to, and spacing it out with other things that I enjoy, because I do things like archery, I do bird watching, I do I write, I read, I go for walks. But there's a whole cluster of towns around us that have their own things and their own events. So it's not as quiet and dull as you would think, but it's definitely quieter than someone that's used to being able to go to Starbucks down the corner would be. You know what I mean?
So you've released a collection of shorts so far. You submitted to magazines in the short fiction sort of field genre. Do you intend to write like maybe more long form work at any time, or are you short stories your thing?
Oh, absolutely. Short stories are fine, but I actually have a very long, very overarching project that have been working on, and I've already pitched this to an agent as a trilogy, but it's probably going to be about 7 or 8 different books. So I had this idea to basically go back to the roots of what I talk about and kind of break down the history of America from like the 80s on to now, like covering the fall of the Soviet Union, the Cold War, and everything like that, the fall of the Berlin Wall. So I had an idea for something that I don't know exactly what I'll call the entire series, um, but the first book in that is called The October Diary, and it follows a high school senior who has just graduated and his teacher in 1992, where the teacher is dying of esophageal cancer, and he is using his last bit of time on Earth to try to mentor and help this person through the kind of zeitgeist that is changing. Because in 1992, the Soviet Union had just collapsed. The Berlin Wall had come down in 1989. So these were events that this person experienced right around the peak of their young adulthood. And I wanted to explore how those events had a impact, kind of a domino effect on the zeitgeist of the United States leading up until 9/11. Kind of like the last golden age of America was probably from like 1980 to like 2001. Because after the Soviet Union collapsed, America thought we were invincible. We thought we could do anything. We formed ourselves up as world police. We started putting bases all over the world. And then in 2001, somebody got the bright idea that maybe we weren't so untouchable, and they hijacked the planes and flew them into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and I believe one just crashed. Right? It's but
Pennsylvania.
And I don't exactly use those huge events as major. Like, it's not historical fiction in the sense that I'm writing a book about 9/11 or I'm writing a book about the fall of the Soviet Union, but it's more or less I'm writing a book about people that were around during that time and how those people and how the zeitgeist reacted to those major events. So that's my major project. And so far it's 3 books, but I've come up with enough spin-off material that I could probably make it like an 8 or 9 book series, to be completely honest with you.
So I'm from North Carolina. You're from South Carolina.
Right.
Do you have an opinion on pulled pork?
Well, it needs to be mustard barbecue. That's
fuck. Oh, I was really hoping you wouldn't say some shit like that. Now I'm upset. Oh, I'm glad I saved this question for last.
Mustard barbecue.
No.
That's
weird. That's weird, but okay.
Mustard barbecue is where it's at. I will die on that hill. I may have lived in Kansas for the last 12 years, but boiled peanuts, sweet potato casserole, and mustard barbecue are my 3 favorite foods.
2 out of 3 ain't bad, but y'all can keep the mustard. I'll stick with vinegar. I'll die satisfied.
All right, we're just gonna have to agree to disagree there.
What ridiculous shit to put on meat, vinegar and mustard, but it tastes good. Okay.
It does.
So, as a guy, small town Kansas, you don't write horror movies. You don't write horror stories, but noir is in its own way pretty horrifying. Do you have any, I don't know, spooky cornfield experiences? You've thought about writing horror?
I've thought about doing horror because the Midwest is like the perfect place for it. Other than of course, I'm from Appalachia. So I've seen some shit in the Appalachian Mountains, but the Midwest just has its own kind of weirdness. I don't know that I believe in the supernatural, but there's been some weird things that have happened to me that I have trouble explaining.
Really? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So one time, me and my friends, we were drunk, so that probably didn't help things. But we were, because I live in corn, Kansas. I don't quite live in wheat, Kansas, or barley, Kansas. So most of the corn you see when you drive through Kansas is feed corn anyway. So it's not like for humans, it's mostly for animals. I remember being drunk and my friend lived next to a cornfield. It wasn't like his cornfield, but it's not uncommon to just see acres and acres of corn and then like one farmhouse like way off in the distance.
Right.
And so we thought it would be fun to just fuck around with this corn that's on like the edge of this guy's property because he's not going to see us. It's like 3 acres away. And while we're fucking around in the corn and everything, we're tramping through it, and our first thought is let's make crop circles because we're like 14, 15. We're like let's stop down and make crop circles right here by the fucking highway. We started hearing drums, and it was like doom 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 doom. Like, I'm not a real rhythmic person, but they sounded like a war like war drums almost, and like we didn't know where they were coming from,
Right.
and we get kind of creeped out a little bit, but then like my friend gets grabbed, like something grabs him, or so he says. He's like, "Oh, something grabbed me." So we get the fuck out of that cornfield, and we turn around to like look back at it, and there's like eyes like scattered throughout the corn. Now,
Whoa.
it's hard to explain this to people that aren't used to it. Corn is very tall. Corn is like 7 or 8 feet tall. These eyes were like near the top of the stalks, and it was like 3 or 4. It was like, two beads of light here, two beads of light here, like kind of like. Have you ever? Because you said you're from North Carolina. You ever see like a deer come up to your porch and there's like
Yeah.
their eyes are kind of glowing this yellowish? It was exactly like that. But fuck
Oh.
me, I don't know any deer that's tall. I don't know any
Right.
deer that's that tall. And I don't know what that was. I don't know what it was. But it freaked me the hell out. I never went near a cornfield again for about 5 more years.
Yeah, I mean, it was aliens pissed off at you stealing the crop circle thing, man. You encroached on
Most
their
likely.
territory.
But dude, yeah. Like talking about it again is like giving me chills, and I'm like, oh god, where are the corn demons? I don't even live anywhere near a cornfield right now. But it was weird because it was like the drums were like farther away, and then they were like right on us when my friend went, something grabbed me, and we book it like 20 feet out of the cornfield, and we just turn around and there's just eyes in the corn, all level, like all the same height, like 6.5 feet
Wow.
up in the air, like because you could say like squirrels, birds, but like that evenly distributed, that many, like I don't know, it's weird.
So,
But
like,
but yeah, no, I've thought about writing horror, and some other genres, but noir is definitely where I fit in
right.
the most, I think.
Like, are you of the disposition where you could believe that those were ghosts? Or, like, you were a ghost guy? You an aliens guy? Or do you just, like,
I don't I don't know. I was raised Catholic, so that complicates some things.
oh,
Um,
okay.
but um, but I don't consider myself a believer anymore. I kind of consider myself an agnostic theist,
Oh,
where to me it doesn't matter if God is real or not, because what I took from the Bible is how I want to live my life anyway. God's like, love thy neighbor, do good deeds, don't be a dick. You know, everything that Jesus had as a major lesson made sense to me. It just I didn't question it. And the Catholic Church, even though it's kind of a cult, gives you a sense of community and belonging. And oh yeah, oh God, it's a cult. Okay, so I was gonna say that the community and the belonging, makes you want to stay around. You want to keep going to mass because there's people there that know you and that understand you and everything like that. But that's
uh-huh.
totally cult. That is absolutely cult speak. So, but as it is, I think that there could be something. I'm not really sure if there is or isn't. Um, but regardless, I want to live my life as a Christian, even if I don't believe in a God. If that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Um,
I understand what you're saying.
yeah. There's actually a book called The Plague by Albert Camus, and one of the characters there talks about how much he wants to be a saint, but he doesn't believe in God, and he wonders if it's possible to be a saint in a world that God has abandoned, and that always stuck with me, because that's kind of how I want to live my life. I want to live my life as a righteous man, even if there's no reward for it in the end. Even if it's pointless.
Hmm.
Um,
I'd be interested
yeah,
to see if that informs your stories at all. So, obviously, you talked about like the despair, maybe a little bit the decay present in I guess where you live in that area. How does that the sort of
right.
because you say you live in a town of 8,000, it's got to be kind of spare and a little desolate compared to just even like a normal
Oh
size
yeah.
city. How does that inform your writing?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it definitely puts me up to the forefront of the zeitgeist of the uh, the world and everything, because where I'm at, you see, Trump 2024 flags. You see, like, I'll vote for Trump in 2024. I'll vote for Trump in 2028. Um, there's not. It's a strange, kind of conservative bubble of people, and then you have like the flip side of that, like it's hard to describe exactly, but you see things like that, and then you'll see another yard that's full of trans flags and Black Lives Matter memorabilia and stuff like that, and then you'll go down the street, like 3 houses down, you'll see somebody that's waving a thin blue line flag with the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. I know a guy who has a pride flag out in front of his house and a "No Quarter Given" flag. It's very weird, but living in a town like that, because people talk. Like I said, I'm kind of famous in my own town just because of what I've been doing. Because I network with the theater department, to produce plays that I've written, and I show off my book to like my teachers and my professors and people at work, and all of the librarians know who I am by name, and the city council knows who I am because I regularly donate to that. So the thing that I benefit the most from living in this kind of town is that I can look at human relationships under a microscope. I can really pinpoint exactly how people feel and why they're feeling it and what impact their feelings have on the national whole. Like I said, with Joe Biden winning the election, he pissed off a lot of people here, and it's not for the reasons that you think, because a lot of people that are on the internet and a lot of people that post on like BuzzFeed and Cracked and Twitter and MSNBC and all this, they talk about how the people that don't like Biden are a bunch of shitty racists who would rather, hold Klan meetings in the woods and, curb stomp minorities in the face. But that's not the case. A lot of people that are angry here are angry because they lost their jobs. They lost their livelihood. They lost their ability to feed their children. They, they suffered, pay cuts from the economy. Coronavirus didn't really affect my town that much. There were probably about 200 cases and maybe 12 fatalities. And that was in the entire span of 2020 to 2022. And that's including all 3 variants. So very small town, very isolated town. But people still lost their jobs. Small businesses still closed forever. Larger businesses kept up the mask mandates, long past, they were firing people for not doing it. They were firing healthcare professionals for not doing it, for getting the vaccine and everything. And so I was able to see all of that from a very close perspective, and I was able to get both perspectives. I was able to see the people that were, on Biden's side during that whole time, and the people that wanted Trump back, and even people that didn't want either of them, people that just wanted to be left alone and survive. It's really interesting because you get a feel of just how different everybody really is, even though the media wants to put us in boxes.
Right. Yeah, I feel like well, honestly, just to shift a little bit back to what you said, I feel like I've buried the lead here a little bit. How did you end up becoming a playwright and getting plays made?
Oh, well, like I said, William Inge was a playwright. He was very famous for that. A lot of his plays have won Pulitzers, and of course, he won the Oscar for Splendor in the Grass. And so, when I was exposed to that kind of writing, I kind of thought to myself, I want to do that. I want to write plays, and and of course, I write in pretty much every medium possible. I write short stories. I write flash fiction, poems. But when I was in college, I ended up doing zoology, which was weird. Didn't end up liking it. It did not end up being my passion. But I took theater electives, and when I talked to the theater professors, I would tell them I want to be a playwright. I want to submit things. I want to do things. So when I was in college, at first I went for zoology, which didn't make sense. It didn't make me happy. I love animals, but not. It wasn't. It was something I was doing for safety. But regardless, I would talk to my professors, and I would talk to my my teachers and everything, and I would be like, I want to be a writer. I want to write plays. Here's plays that I've written. And during the William Inge Theater Festival, we have this thing called the New Play Labs, where you can submit your work to the board and they will review it. And if you succeed, you get your plays read to the town during this festival. And so that's where I got my start with that, was getting them read at this festival. And if the pandemic hadn't happened, I probably would have had a few of them actually produced and performed at our theaters. But that ended up falling to the wayside, at least for now.
Yeah, the pandemic put a lot of wrenches in people's plans, but it also gave people, I guess, I know you said the pandemic didn't really touch not Lawrence, I'm sorry, didn't really touch your city, but it also gave a lot of people like time to settle and pursue these sort of creative endeavors. Did you find yourself having more time or less time, or?
I was considered an essential worker, so I didn't ever get any time off.
Oh shit! Yeah.
They slapped a mask on my face and gave me overtime. And I know a lot of the restrictions that were put down on us, because they were passed down from our governor, Laura Kelly, who lives in, I think she lives in Topeka. So she lives in this big city where things are getting affected and they are getting impacted, and she's putting these mandates down on towns that have like 400 cases, and so they shut down non-essential businesses. Gas prices went up and everything like that. So it really hurt small towns like mine. Like I said, a lot of small businesses closed their doors permanently because they could not recover from the shutdowns and everything like that. I know my local library was closed for like a year and a half, and they even talked about maybe not being able to open. And they're one of the largest libraries in Kansas. So it definitely it did a lot of damage to us. Even if the virus itself didn't claim very many victims, the impacts that the virus had on the culture certainly left its mark. It certainly made us remember it.
Well, I've seen a little sample of some photography you do. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So a big thing, I love doing photography as a hobby. The cover of my book is actually a photo that I took. If you look it up and everything, the kind of stormy night sky, and it's natural. I don't use filters or any special lenses or anything. I just go out with my Kodiak, and not my Kodak, my Kodak, and I just go out and I take pictures and everything. So a lot of my book covers will be pictures that I've taken. Everything. And one thing I do as a hobby. Remember, I said I went to college for zoology.
Right.
I'm really big into like nature photography, and not even like really good nature photography. I've taken a few that are pretty good, but there is a project called Project Noaa that's tied to National Geographic, and they are a citizen-run kind of science project where you can photograph and map and kind of collect data on organisms that are in the wild. And I do a lot of stuff for that. I've probably registered about 1,500 species, and that's always fun.
Wow.
So usually when I go out on a walk, I'll stop and I'll take pictures of trees and bushes and flowers and fungus and stuff, and then I'll go through my numerous field books that I have, if I don't already know what it is, and I'll go through and I'll look up things about it, and then I'll register it to that website. But I've done photography as a hobby for quite a long time.
Cool. Based field book. Enjoy.
Yeah.
I've got a few insect and plant books. That's pretty cool.
I will say that I'm hopeful that as my journey continues as a writer, I do end up reaching people, because I used to, I had, a rough childhood growing up, and I want people, for the longest time, I wanted fame and money and power because I thought that it would fill the hole inside of me. And I'm slowly coming to terms as I enter my 30s that it's not going to happen. So I need to introspect and move that desire to reach people into something positive instead. And so that's why I've kind of made it my mission, instead of having fame and money and power to be worshipped, having fame and money and power to be able to reach as many people as I can so that I can change the world.
That's good growth.
Right.
Well, it's been great talking to you, Kit.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Oh, I was going to say, do you want me to plug my socials at the end of this? Because I can totally do that.
Absolutely. Plug everything you want to plug.
Right. Well, thank you guys for listening to me and listening to me ramble on. You can find me on Twitter at It's Kit Williams, and you can find me on Twitch at Kit Williams Author. I'm also on Goodreads, and all you have to do is search up my name and the dose makes the poison, and I'll be the first result for you. You can follow me on all those platforms to keep up with news, to keep up with projects. I stream on Twitch to about 20 or so people. I do book club streams. I do writing streams where you can actually see me write and you can see the process of my thought process go hand in hand. On Twitter, I mostly post memes. I need to stop doing that. I need to focus on making that an actual mature 30-year-old thing to do. And then Goodreads, if you're ever curious about the books that I read and the books that inspire me, that's the place to see it. So thank you all for listening to me, and I hope that you continue to follow me in my journey as a writer.
Thanks for coming on, Kit.
No problem.
If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the Unreal podcast feed. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to be producing like actual YouTube content for that soon, as opposed to, for now, we just upload podcasts in total, in full, and podcast highlights. Follow the Unreal Press at Unreal_Press on Twitter. Follow me, Mansa Rhyme, on Twitter. I announce like podcast dates, and really, that's the sum of it. I have a lot of socials. None of them see any activity except Discord, which you can, I don't know, shout at me in our Unreal Press Discord server, which is linked in both the show notes and the description on YouTube. Thanks for listening. Bye.
I may have gone too far in a few places.